Hi, welcome back. This is a multi-part video series on responsive design. And for this section, we will focus on implementation of the design work. So not only in the generation of assets, but also how to hand these off to engineers and what those assets should look like. With responsive design, as we mentioned earlier, we're designing across different devices, and they have what we call breakpoints. So breakpoint is essentially a dimension that you've defined as the threshold, so the point at which something will transform or change based on the device. So an example of this would be the navigation bar. We'll take that for Facebook. The navigation bar will span 100% of an iPhone device, and it may measure out at 720 pixels. But then when you increase it more than 720, but less than maybe 1280, for example, the design of it may morph and look slightly different based on that device size. So the breakpoint is really that measurement between one device and another that you specify. And the unfortunate thing is that there actually aren't a set of universal breakpoints that are published. This was something that I found really odd as a designer when I first started working in this methodology. And it really, again, goes back to knowing your customer and getting a sense of the types of devices they use and at which points do their perceptions or their expectations differ the further that the screen sizes increase. So this can be conducted through some generalized research. I have one research linked here called the Global Analytics Stat Counter. You might also take an audit of the people who currently use your app or website and try to aggregate information on common devices or common screen sizes. There's no universal guidelines, mostly because of this proliferation of sizes and pixel densities and devices and brands as well. So because of this variance in the marketplace, it then falls onto the designer to understand those usage patterns and to design around them. So ultimately, we need to learn how to aggregate that data to inform your specifications. And I provide an example here of some common breakpoints that you can consider. So here with between phones, tablets and phablets, and desktops or laptops, you'll see the 320, anything 0 to 320, although a phone is at 0 pixels, but this is just the model. Anything up to 320 is essentially a phone. Anything up to 720 are the larger tablets or larger phone. And then anything beyond 1024 is desktops and laptops. So all of the in-between space is really the breakpoints at which you design for. So your content starts morphing between, for example, tablets, desktops, so between 720 and 1024. But the minute it switches to 1024 or higher, your navigation may look different. And the same way if you reduce backwards. If you go to Global Analytics Stat Counter, you will see things, see different components that you can kind of drill into. So you can look at the different browsers that are being used worldwide. You can search the market share segmentation, the operating system market share, the fourth one down, so 3 across, 2 down, it says screen resolution sizes. And that would be, I think, the important data that you can use to help define those responsive design breakpoints. If you go right underneath that, you'll see the different usage data between the different generalized devices. So between mobile, tablet versus desktop. And here, I'll actually open it so that you can see what that looks like. So in this link, I deep linked to the browser market share worldwide. So the way to read this this data is aggregated across multiple websites and based on tracking information. So with GDPR and some of the privacy laws that are surrounding it and kind of bleeding over into the US, this data may start becoming limited just based on the people who opt into it and the availability on those websites. So with that in mind, knowing the data limitations, we're looking at worldwide, 64% of users worldwide use Chrome, 17% use Safari, 4% use Firefox. And now we also have some other browsers available as well. So this should give you an idea of which operating systems are most prevalent, maybe not most important. Doesn't have to be best operating system, but just gives you an idea, again, of usage patterns. So if I were to scroll down here and look at mobile versus tablet versus desktop, it will then go to that page. And here's some neat insights across different digital properties worldwide. Is that 52% of content is consumed on mobile, and 45% is on desktop, and almost 3% is on tablet. So here you're even looking at the emphasis of content across these different sizes, or at least these different types of devices. And this is worldwide. What's great about this is that you can even segment by country as well. So usage patterns in Africa may differ from North America, may differ even specifically for the United States. So again, knowing your customer is super important. This is one way to gather information on your specific market share, but make sure you also check in with with people that you interview or conduct research on to better understand those patterns and habits. Okay. So here are just some screenshots of those figures to give you an idea of the type of output you'll see if you go to the status counter. Another way to think about breakpoints, this looks a lot more complicated than it actually is, but you'll actually see the width here on this. It looks like a timeline, but it's actually just a width graph. So here, anything up to 240 on the left is really a minor breakpoint for those smaller devices. And the further you go out, the larger your screen is. But then also here, this one helps explain what's a major breakpoint. So the major breakpoint is where your interface drastically reformulates itself for the next device size up. But then also the minor breakpoints are all the adjustments in between to accommodate different device sizes in tablet, for example. So if you have a really small tablet for kids, then the design might be a little bit more squished or a little bit more narrow. But as you upgrade to like an industrial design sized tablet, you'll have more screen real estate. So there'll be another minor breakpoint where things are spread out a little bit more evenly. So this is just a visual representation, not necessarily something scientific that you would implement in your design specifications, but should give you an idea of not only the major points at which your product kind of morphs itself, but also kind of the in-between steps as well, based on the width and the pixel density and just the size of your device overall. So this was a quick snapshot as well from GA Stat Counter. And again, this is worldwide based on the websites that have this analytic data built into it. Doesn't represent all of the data across all the different countries and websites. So again, keep that in mind as you apply this type of information to your design work. But here we're looking at, practically 13 or 14% of folks who use a device that renders digital content between 360 and 640. So that's a pretty small or low resolution cell phone. And here on design computers or engineering computers where we have much higher pixel density, but also much larger screen sizes, we're looking at 7.6%. So I find that students fall into this trap a lot, especially with web design, where they design for their monitor size or their screen size, and again, not using the information available to them to design for screen sizes that reflect their user base. So don't fall into that trap, but use this type of information to inform your best screen sizes to design for. You may also have limitations that you encounter based on your prototyping software or your design software. So they may kind of prescribe these different sizes based on popular devices of that time, but you are always free to deviate from that if your research specifies that it makes for a better experience. As you create blueprints or specifications or red lines for your engineering staff, make sure you steer clear of what we call absolute values. So an absolute value is a number that has a fixed measurement associated with it. So in this case, saying that your screen width size or the design that lives in your screen size is exactly 1280. So if you design it that way, for example, you will have a 1280 design that starts on your phone but then bleeds right off of it. The same thing for tablet as well. So that pixel, that specific pixel measurement is not as helpful for people who are looking to build your product. And you can see here that I also kind of repeat that for the different design elements. What we want to do is actually use relative values instead. So a unit of measurement that is fluid and can change based on the container size. So here you'll see for the desktop design, we're looking at 90% width of that header and then 40 pixels. That again is a specific absolute value, so we wouldn't use that. But here on the right side, we actually have 45%. And then this little graphic in the middle is 10%. So what we're telling our engineering team is that the width of this design should only span 90% of the screen size. And similarly, that image on the right should only span 45%, so a little under half of the width of your screen. And you can see that with these relative values, you can extend your design specifications across different devices without having to measure each pixel as needed between the different devices. There are plenty of debates and different measurements that you can design for. I think the most important is either ems or pixels. I'm sorry, ems or percentages. Percentage is actually probably the easiest, in my opinion, to conceptualize from a design standpoint. But ems may be a little bit more specific for your engineering team. So a pixel is pixel, but depending on the screen size and density, that may be adjusted based on your design assets. Because they're fixed, it's very difficult to scale those. So again, keep in mind the 1280 width. Showing a design on mobile that's 1280 will mean that most of it is actually cut off, whereas a medium-sized monitor will be able to render the 1280. And then if you look at the 1920, then your design actually only spans about 2/3 of the screen. The rest of it is blank. The other unit of measurement that is more commonly used is the em measurement. So this is very similar to print design and kind of the basics of typography, where we're looking at the measurements of the size of the font itself. So from the top of the font's capital height, so if it's a capital M, the tippy top of that M, as well as all the way to the bottom of its lowest descender. So the descender is anything that falls below kind of that line. So for instance, the bottom of a G, that little tail that hangs off the G, that would technically be a descender. With a capital M, there is no descender because it ends kind of on that line. So this is a unit of proportion that translates your pixel designs into this scalable kind of, it's very similar to a percent, but it's a different unit of measurement that you can design relative to text that you're using in your product design work. So this becomes really important. It becomes really important when it comes to proportions in your design work. So as designers, we are very kind of hypnotized and possessed by typography. So designing around type becomes an important element for web design, but being able to scale content based on that text becomes even more important. We have root M, which is another measurement, and then we also have percents, which is something that we just covered in the previous slide. We also have ways for you to convert your kind of static or absolute font size into pixels, into points, and into ems and percentages. Again, I would use this as a guide and not so much the leading scientific way of measuring between the different sizes. You will still want to personalize and customize your specifications to your product. So this can be a reference for you, but make sure that you actually do the measurements yourself just to make sure that they represent the accuracy that you need for your product. And I also provide the link here at the bottom for you to reference after. So one of the most heated things about responsive design is actually how to create the guidelines for our engineers. So it's not enough to just send them a bunch of flattened design files and screenshots of how something should look in the app. It's very important to accompany those designs with guidelines on how to implement, or at least your idea of how it would be implemented, because obviously they'll have different methodologies and technologies available to them. So there's a couple different terms for this that kind of float around. We have guidelines, we have specifications, we have red lines, and there's probably a bunch of other terms that I don't even know of. At Amazon, we actually call them red lines because, a long time ago when we used to have print design, or more prevalent print design, we would actually use red pens to red line on a physical specification doc. I did a lot of red lines. I also did blue lines, which is something else completely. So these red lines or specifications or guidelines are used by your engineering team to, again, inform the way that they build the product. For you, your responsibility as a designer is to create annotated screenshots that explain the design. So for instance, if we were looking at this phone screen and had an app on it, you would point out this is the header and this is the expectations of the header and these are the different elements that live in it. And when you tap it, you go somewhere else, for example. So actually marking your screenshots and explaining the different components on the site or in the app. You'll also provide flowcharts that help explain the customer journey or the user journey. So this is also used as a specification doc so that they know how to build the product and in which order. So not only the order in which they build, but also the order in which it shows up in your product. So being able to specify this flowchart gives them a way to build upon the existing designs that you've established. You will also provide a prototype as well. So this is helpful so that they get a sense of the look and feel of your product. And if you have a prototype that's rendered appropriately for a mobile phone, they can even download it or access it on their own so that they get a sense of how it works and how the content flows from one screen to another. And what I've found to be the best use of time really is to film a video walkthrough of that product. So you're getting some practice doing that in this class, but showing them a video is another way to demonstrate the prototype, but then also to walk them through what we call a happy path. So in the case that everything worked out the way it's supposed to, you would tap on something on the home screen and it would take you to another screen, and you take this interaction and go to another screen. So this is a way to avoid people getting stuck in the prototype or not understanding your intentions behind some of your design work. So this is an example of an annotated screenshot. I can't load anything from work because it's confidential, but this pretty much mirrors what it would look like if I were to hand something off at Amazon. So here, I actually have the screenshot that's loaded onto this screen. It might be a PDF or an InDesign doc or Illustrator, just pretty much whatever design software I have at my disposal. I think I've used Word also. So here I have the screenshot, and I've labeled different components that live on the screen with a little circle and the letter. And then on the right side here, I have the explanations of all those content. And I not only specify what it is, but here I also include notes on how it should behave or where it should go, any of the technical specifications that I find are important. So if I'm providing relative values here, or if I'm providing colors or hex codes, this is the area in which I would do it versus delivering that content as needed or in an ad hoc manner. So our next video will cover responsive design user interface kits. So these are things that you can download that are completely turnkey and should help streamline your design process.